Okay, tonight we're going to be looking at another combo, another AM/FM stereo phonograph TV combo. It's another Magnavox. You can see it's got the sliding doors on the top, just like that last one I did. That was a black and white combo. The difference here is we have a color combo. So I've already removed the screws, a bunch of screws. The Magnavox are loaded with screws. I'm getting ready to remove the back now. Basically has the same kind of layout. You've got the main controls for this sharpness, horizontal, contrast, vertical. It's got a couple other things here. Chroma tint. This is something silly. I don't know what Magnavox was thinking, but it changes the tint of the warmth of the CRT to a more sepia-like tone. I have no idea why. It also has a quick picture, which basically keeps the heaters of the tubes in a warmed up condition. I think it basically gives it about half normal filament voltage by running the voltage through a diode, so it clips off half the sine wave, so it gets half the voltage. Anyway, dumb. I don't like quick pictures. It's really not that quick anyway. Instead of taking maybe a full minute for the picture to come up, it comes up in 20 seconds. You know, big deal. And in the meantime, you're keeping everything turned on, which I just don't like that idea. So you leave it turned off. Keep both these off, and you'll be much happier. Okay, I've already removed the screws, so I'm going to take the back off now. So we will carefully tilt off the back and lift it off these little retaining clips right here. It holds us back. Let me get this thing out of the way. We'll talk about this, specifically the differences between this and the black and white set. Starting over here, you'll see we have the same deal. We've got our 12-inch speaker, paper cone speaker. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's a horn speaker up in there. This little styrofoam back on. There's also a horn. You've got the crossover mounted down here with the caps and the coils and the resistors to basically redirect the. I don't know why this. I didn't do that. I don't know what that's all. That's for the phonograph. Anyway, to direct the low frequency of the audio signal to the big speaker, big paper speaker, and the higher frequencies to the horn speaker. And also up above, below this is another Micromatic turntable, which we'll show in a few minutes. Let's move on over here. This is very different than the black and white one. Clearly, it's color. For starters, we have a round tube CRT. That's a delta gun configured color picture tube. It's got a much larger yoke. It's got convergence coils. It's got the 3 guns, it's got purity rings, it's got blue lateral adjustment. All this stuff is used, well, the yoke is used to deflect the electron beam like any other CRT, but all this other stuff, the convergence coils, the purity, all that has to do with making a delta gun, which is literally a triad, a red, blue, green triad of dots, all hit the CRT in the exact right spot. If you're not familiar with how that works, you can look up aperture screen or something like that on Google, and you'll see there's basically the way the color was reproduced in early color tube sets was with a triad, and because of the geometry of your sweep, you had to very minutely adjust the deflection of the electron beam so they'd strike the tube face in the correct angles as they tend to move away from the center and get up into the corners and the edges of the CRT. Anyway, that's what these convergence coils do. This purity adjustment basically is like a fine tuning to make sure that the beams strike exactly the triad in the correct angle. You know, little micro manufacturing tolerances can build up. This re-beams the circuit so they hit in the exact right spot, regardless of the sweep. The blue lateral, that has to do with how you adjust the dots. The dots move, the red and the green dots move diagonally. The blue dot moves vertically and horizontally. So you basically get the red dot, the green dot to intersect, and then you, by going in diagonals, so in other words, they only have one spot where everything converges perfectly. And then the blue, you have the option of going vertically and horizontally to match it directly. Anyway, that's all has to do with static and dynamic convergence. We can talk about that at some later point in time. Moving on to the chassis. This is a color, all-tube color chassis. It's sort of a RC clone, and I say that because a lot of color TVs were based on RCA designs. The demodulation, of the color signal, all that's done on this PC board, which is basically identical to RCA's PC board. The sweep circuits for the horizontal and the vertical are back in the back PC board, along with some AGC controls and other tubes. And the audio is also on a separate PC board. This layout is very similar to an RCA clone, but for one major difference, and I have no idea why they did this. RCAs always have the flyback right here, and this power transformer on a RCA is always on this side. So for some reason they swapped. They took the high voltage, the sweep tubes, the damper, the flyback, and moved it to the left side of the chassis, and they moved the power transformer to the right side of the chassis. I don't know why. It seems silly. But anyway, that's what they did. They also did these controls are a little bit different. On most of your RCA sets, all these control pots for the screen drives and stuff are mounted literally directly into the chassis. In fact, you can even see some cutouts here. These holes look like they were probably supposed to have some pots installed in there. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they did it, but it is. This set has a flyback that fits inside this can, and this top pops off. I'm not going to bother to remove it. When I got this set originally, this entire shield was gone. You just had the flyback hanging out in the breeze, and it was not very well supported. The high voltage rectifier tube, which is mounted inverted on like a stand inside here, was just hanging out in the breeze, and it was kind of not very secure. There was no cover. I was able to get a cover from a generous offer from a forum member who I was communicating the problem with, and he happened to have a spare can. So he sent me this shield, which fit perfectly. The only modification required was I had to actually cut a hole to let this focus tube poke through. This was solid sheet metal before, and I had to literally cut a hole out to let this tube poke out. That's because there were different variants of this where they either used a tube like this one has, or a solid state rectifier, which would have been inside this can. Therefore, there was no reason to have a hole. So I had to make a mild, very small modification to make that work, but it's no big deal. It was easy to fix. As you can see, this set's had some work. Some of these yellow, clearly out of place capacitors were replaced. These are not original. It's interesting. I'm going to show you something. I'm going to pull this tube. For anybody working on RCA chassis, you see this cap right here? See my pointer? I'm putting this yellow cap right there. That cap is almost always bad on an RCA chassis. I think it's got something to do with the proximity to this power resistor and this tube. What this is a grid coupling cap to the difference amplifiers. This one is always, I call it bad. It's not shorted, but it's like it's very lossy. These caps, which perform the same function, they're grid coupling caps to the other difference amplifiers. They do the same function electronically, but they're not in close proximity to the same heat source, I think, that this one is. So for some reason, these two are always okay, and this one's always not okay. So I just automatically replace this cap, and this cap. I think I replaced this cap just for sake of doing it. The only other thing I might want to point out to you RCAs and clone owners, there's some wires that go across the top of this PC board right in here. They're jumper wires, or I guess they couldn't figure out how to make the traces work right. So they literally have a wire like poking here, comes across, pokes down. If you ever have a CRT that gets a solid tint, like a blue or a green tint or something like that, for no reason, it doesn't seem to react very well to screen controls, check these wires. They corrode, they pop open, and it screws up the difference amps, and everything's all out of whack. So you always want to check these wires. I usually just go in there and give them a slight tug. If they're If they're corroded, they'll break instantly, and then you just replace them and you'll be good to go. Anyway, that's something to keep in mind whenever you're working on an RCA or clone. Check those wires that run across the top of the PC board on the chroma board. And that's what this is called, is the chroma board. If I can just get this tube to go back in, we'll be able to continue the video. There we go. Okay, so anyway, place some caps there. This one, surprisingly, looks like it has all of its original sweep tube caps. I see original capacitors back here on the sweep. That's kind of unusual. I usually have bad ones there, but I guess this one checked okay. It even has the original electrolytic cap for the vertical cathode bypass cap. Electrolytic caps on this era, like these cans back here, they're often okay. Don't be too big a hurry to replace them. I find they frequently are just fine. So moving on across the PC, across the chassis, we get into the sweep circuits. I already talked about that. I think over here, I don't know what that transformer's for. I don't know if that's a choke or that's part of the instant on or what. I really don't remember what the deal is on that. Up here you have the speaker. This is the Astrosonic, just like on the black and white version I did a little while ago. Here's a power transformer for it. This set's got some kind of weirdness going on. I'm going to have to pull this chassis out because every now and then, excuse me, the AM kind of whacks out on me. And it's one of these IF transformers. I think is not soldered. If you just touch it or just push on it a little bit, all of a sudden the AM pops in and works perfectly. So there's something going on here. I'll just have to pull that out and work on it. I don't feel like doing it right now. And then of course you have the speakers on this side, the tuner for the TV. Mounted right here, points straight up just like on the black and white Magnavox. And that's it. That's all there is for the tube setup. So I'm gonna flip it around and we'll get the functions like I did on the other one where you'll see the front and everything working. That's all.